Hello, this is part 6 of Who Runs This Place? Written constitutions versus political conventions and steering groups. Now, in part 5 I outlined how there are semi-legitimate or legitimate steering groups and even there are legitimate political conventions in that there are democratic political conventions as well as power conventions. For instance, a power convention would be like the United States does not attack the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union has nuclear weapons, we have nuclear weapons, and we will destroy each other. That then became a political convention called détente, right, between the United States and the Soviet Union. Neither wrote laws, right, about that political convention until they made a treaty, which then became the law of both lands, okay, and then they limited it through statutes of how many nuclear weapons they're supposed to have. Now, nuclear weapons used to be the key part of a nation's sovereignty. It's deterrent, okay, and several countries around the world are seeking nuclear weapons for this reason, if not for defensive reasons or offensive reasons, like North Korea, Pakistan, Israel have all gone down this route, and Iran would like to follow. Well, really, how significant are nuclear weapons in a world where there seems to be a basic level of very, very limited democracy, and above that the real world politics of neo-feudalism, as I've explained in part 4. That might sound a bit extreme, but that's the way it seems to be. For instance, let me give you a concrete example. The Taliban were not recognised by any other Islamic power until the Bin Laden family recognised the Taliban as the governors of Afghanistan. That shows that families, and that's what the basis of feudalism is, families and their pressure groups and their charities and their armed factions, their own private armies, which is what the Al Qaeda network is, and their banking system, okay. Like I've said in other videos, there's some good things about the Islamic banking system because they don't use usury, which basically the entire Western system is based on, through central banking, because central banks issue out a money supply which will eventually cause too much money in the system, which creates too much credit, and then will eventually cause the system to collapse, and then the government has to buy up all the banks, and the chief bondholders and shareholders will then be the central bank, which is why the Russian mafia tried to take over the Russian central bank and assassinated one of its leading figures. But all this doesn't mean that the central bankers and the banks are the top dogs. It used to be that way, but as terrorism has encroached more and more, especially in the Middle East, to give the example of Al Qaeda that I did, more and more these you have to choose between different competing factions within Western, the so-called Western democracies. Okay, as terrorist groups have created their own steering groups, their own pressure groups to extort money from legitimate businesses and to extort money from governments, change the nature of the balance of power between terrorism, organised crime and governments. The banking system has really been in the middle, and so I feel quite sorry for the banking system in some regards. Okay, because they're the middlemen. They're going to get the stick either way, from the government or from the organised crime guys, okay, and terrorists. and of course that happened in Lebanon. So governments have created or been in an evolutionary process continuously throughout history of having parallel undemocratic structures to protect the democratic structures. This might seem a bit very, very strange and odd, but it seems to be the case that this is happening. That there are groups out there of people who are having links with private security or the military, the national militaries, that have private intelligence organisations that are trying to help the governments defend themselves against terrorism, if you like. Now, of course, government has its own intelligence networks, but they vary in size and power. For instance, you could no way compare the power of MI5 or MI6 to the power of the CIA. MI6 and MI5 might be better trained, but the CIA is by far more powerful. Okay. It then comes down to the concepts, right, to crystallise all these arguments about political conventions, power conventions, steering groups, and written constitutions. There's a book by a CFR author called Ruling Without Governance, okay? And that is the concept of as militaristic regimes were formed in Turkey and Egypt, those militaristic cultures were ingrained throughout the constitution. Now, although Turkey became a sort of semi-functioning democracy, the power of the army, and similarly with Indonesia, the power of the army affected all the cultural ideas of how that government should work. So therefore, the army was ruling without being in government. Okay, and that's a very important idea to master. That this is also the way that Western democracies run to a certain extent. It doesn't necessarily mean that some steering groups don't believe in democracy, okay, but they have a particular view. Say there might be social democrats, or on the opposition side, they might be Tories. It really in some ways doesn't bode well for democracy, because democracy is based on a key idea that people are literary and understand. Now, people might be able to read and write, but I doubt people focus much of their time on understanding, and that's the problem. You know, I like a football match. I've got an MMA blog, right? I even will admit to watching Street Come Dancing. All right, amazing, shocking as that is. Okay, I like entertainment, but a lot of people are completely focused on entertainment and they're not interested in politics at all. It doesn't affect their lives. Well, you'll never be able to get those people to be interested. That's the crowd that likes circuses, okay? The crowd that likes X Factor. You're never going to get them involved, so you might as well let them live their happy little lives, all right? And so you, in a way, you need a democracy that is, in a sense, with say the focuses on the lower middle, higher working class people who are the doctors, the university professors, in the army. You know, you need a level of people who can understand. Okay. Now, I'm not talking about excluding people from votes or anything like that, but in a system where you want democracy for everyone, you have to then have some sort of structure to prevent those who are against democracy succeeding in polluting the whole system. And so there's certain cut-offs, and reality is created by the connections people make with one another, and that's what I'm trying to say. So you would need a group like this that's as ruthless as the sort of neo-feudalists out there, like Bin Laden, to prevent the fall of democracy. And I think that's what the process is, what's happening in this process today.